Hello and welcome back to This Day in History. It is June 27th, 2024. Not that the year matters, it's about the date. Um, we have some interesting stuff all across the board. We have some interesting birthdays. Um, um, we have some interesting history, not only from our country, but from elsewhere too. So let's just get right into it. We'll start off with birthdays. 1846, Charles Stewart Parnell. He was an Irish nationalist. He was the leader of the Irish Home Rule. He was born on this day. And what is the Irish Home Rule? Well, I looked it up. Basically, it was the movement that basically for Irish independence from British rule, essentially. So he was a nationalist, and he was a leader in that front to have or see to Irish autonomy from British rule. 1869, we have an American anarchist. She was actually Lithuanian born. She immigrated to the United States. Her name is Emma Goldman. She was heavily involved in leftist activities from 1890 to 1917. She died in 1940. I don't know a whole lot more about her other than she was just, if I'm reading between the lines properly, from 1890 to 1917, being Lithuanian, is it possible that she was a supporter of the Bolshevik Revolution? Possibly. Being Lithuanian, she probably had no love for the Romanov dynasty. So she probably was very pro-Bolshevik. But then again, her activities stopped in 1917, and I don't know why. I didn't really get too much further into that, but moving right along, 1880, Helen Keller was born. Now, we just had a blurb about her here recently. I think it was on the day that she died. But what's fascinating about Helen Keller is that she was an author and she was an educator, and she was deaf and blind. So she is really the catalyst for educational methods, for the deaf and the blind. So she's an inspiration for sure. So her birthday was today. In 1927, Bob Keeshan, he was an American TV producer, entertainer. If you're older like me, you would know him simply as Captain Kangaroo. I remember him. He was quite the fascinating character. I forgot that his name was Bob. Bob Keeshan was his name. He was born on this day in 1927. Funny enough, I have a friend named Robert who is a dead ringer for him. He dressed up as Captain Kangaroo one time at a convention. I had to do a double take because I thought I saw Bob Keeshan, and I was like, wait, that dude's dead. Likewise, he does a really good Montgomery Scott, Scotty from Star Trek, the movies, costume. And again, it was one of those things, because the hair, because the beard and all that, or the mustache that he had just right. I had to do a double take because Robert pulling Scotty off really well, and I was like, I thought Jimmy Doohan was dead. I mean, like, he was it just happened to be that the costume that he was wearing in the right angle, he, depending on what costume he was wearing, he could be a dead ringer for Keeshan, Bob Keeshan, Captain Kangaroo, or he was a dead ringer for James Doohan, who played Scotty from Star Trek, the original Star Trek. 3 years later, in 1930, Ross the Boss, that was his moniker, Ross the Boss Perot. He was an American businessman. He was born on this day in 1930. Called him Ross the Boss because he ran for president unsuccessfully in 1992, and it says that he ran for president in 1996. I vaguely remember that. I think he put his name in the hat, but like he didn't stick around very long. Kind of like the first time around. In the first time around, is that it was a three-way. So it was sitting President Bush Senior. It was Bill Clinton, and then it was Ross Perot. They were all running. Now the thing is, Ross Perot he ran as an independent. He dropped out, came back, dropped out, came back. I mean, he did that a couple times. He swore up and down that his daughter was getting married and that someone had threatened to ruin her wedding, essentially blackmail if he didn't drop out of the race. He dropped out, the wedding happened, I assume, then he came back. And he did it to save his daughter's special day. And I think that's where he lost traction. I mean, like, the thing is, like, if you could have taken the best parts of all three of them, that would have made a great president. If there was ever a way that we could have done the triumvirate, I butchered that name, but how the Roman Empire got started, actually had three co-emperors until Julius Caesar bumped out the other two. But they were triumvirate. I don't know. It's Latin. If there was a way that we could have done that year, and it's not possible because it's not set up in our system, all three of them brought something unique to the table. You had the governmental experience of Bush. You had the youth and vitality of Clinton. And you had the business acumen of Perot. And we probably could have had a pretty decently run country. Perot just didn't have the traction because nobody could really get behind someone who quits and then comes back and then quits and comes back. It sends the wrong signal. It sends the signal of, like, you're wishy-washy, or that you can't commit to anything, and that's a tough job. And you need to be able to commit to a course of action, whether it's right or wrong. You need to stay the course, and he showed the American people that he really couldn't stay the course, and I think that's why no one really voted for him. I was a year away from being able to vote, so I had to sit that one out, and I was hoping that Bush would win re-election, but Clinton won, obviously, and the rest is history. Yeah. So Ross the Boss, he was born on this day in 1930. You know who else was born on this day in 1966? J.J. Abrams. I'm going to go on a soapbox on that one too. I don't like the guy. I don't like what he did to Star Trek. I don't like what he did to Star Wars. I think he thinks that he's like a pretty amazing director. I think his I think his work is garbage. I'll just leave it at that. For someone to say this isn't your daddy's Star Trek, he basically just pissed off a whole lot of Star Trek fans, and it was like, I'm making this movie my way, I'm telling this story my way, and if you don't like it, piss off. This isn't for you anyway, it's for the next generation. And he essentially did that with the Star Wars franchise as well, and with the Star Wars fans. And the thing is, like, you don't just summarily dismiss the hardcore fans that have been there from the very beginning just so that you can appease the other, the newer generations. Like, you're a tool. So I'm not even wishing you a happy birthday. I don't like you. You're a tool. Okay, I'm being petty, sorry. At any rate, it's J.J. Abrams' birthday. He was born in 1966. Happy birthday, J.J. Abrams. On this day in 1787, British historian Edward Gibbon had completed his work, and this is a mouthful. This was the actual title of the work: The History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. If it's the book that I'm thinking of, I think I had it when I was It was when my dad passed, so I was 10. It was a book about that thick, and I got about through this much of it. It was kind of a boring read. If it's the one that I'm thinking of, there was a lot of technical stuff, and it was too much for a 10-year-old. Would I sit through and read it now? Maybe as an audiobook. I mean, if it's that thick, I'm probably not. On this day in 1844, Joseph Smith, the Joseph Smith who founded the Mormon Church, he was murdered by an armed mob in Carthage, Illinois. I don't know what to say about that. Murdered. A church founder murdered. Apparently there were some people who didn't like him, so they killed him. 1862, this is Civil War. Right, so it's on this day, it's the Battle of Cold Harbor. On this day, General Lee attacks Union forces, and he drives them back in a disorganized disarray, and they fall back to the south side of the Chickahominy River. It is on this day, see if I'm getting this right. So the Japanese yen, that's their monetary system, was actually officially adopted currency in 1869. But it is on this day that the government suspended the exchange of clan notes, which were basically money that were issued by the feudal lords since the 16th century. So while 1869 they had adopted a national currency called the yen, these feudal lords were still issuing clan notes up until that point. So it was on this day in 1871 that practice was abolished in favor of the use of the Japanese yen, which is in use today. It's still their official monetary unit today. 1917, Greece declares war on the Central Powers. Who are the Central Powers? That would be Germany, Austro-Hungarian Empire, basically the Central European countries that had formed their alliance, and essentially it was Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. In 1977, I always butcher this, Djibouti, Djibouti, it's an African country. They gained their independence from France in 1977 on this day. On this day in 2001, Jack Lemmon, he was an actor in the 60s. You younger generations would probably know him better as from Grumpy Old Men and Grumpier Old Men. He starred alongside Walter Matthau in those movies. They did movies before in the 50s and 60s. Actually, Jack Lemmon did a movie with Marilyn Monroe. I just can't remember the name of it. But I mean, he'd been around a long time, but he died on this day in 2001 at the age of 76. And the last thing for today is, it's on this day in 2007 that Gordon Brown of the British Labour Party would become the United Kingdom Prime Minister. He had previously served as the Chancellor of the Exchequer, essentially the British version of the IRS, from 1997 to 2007. So that is this day in history. I am going to eat now. I'm going to have my sandwich, and then I'm going to go to work. So this has been this day in history. Thank you for tuning in and joining me. We will do it again tomorrow for June 28th. Have a blessed day. Take care. Be safe. And we'll talk to you soon. All right. Bye.